The following is intended for informational purposes only. It is intended to supplement classroom training and documentation. It should not be relied on as a replacement or substitute for classroom training with a live expert instructor. This workshop uses process flow to create a custom registration form. This example registration form is for training purposes only. In no way does it replace the existing base registration form. Welcome to Lesson 3, where we will now be discussing more advanced schema designer techniques. We have created so far a rather basic registration form type using the schema designer with the UI hints. Here we will explore further how we can create a more sophisticated user interface with drop-downs, defaulting, and dependencies, all within the schema designer. Let's pick up with the registration form type that we created earlier. If we look at the InputMap, we will see that the status is not defaulted to anything, and I have the business object and the related transaction BO with a input field without any drop downs or any lookup search capabilities. The create date time should be defaulted to the exact time, the current time. It doesn't have to be shown, and the version can be hidden completely. So there's definitely work that we can do in order to improve this particular user interface. So let's see how much we can do of that within the actual business object using UI hints. So looking back again at the different elements, process flow type and description has no need to change. But if we go to status and I click on there, I will see that I have an ability to do some defaulting and system variables, and I'm going to default this using a literal value to and the question is what literal value to use. I want to set it to active. So what is the active value? Well, I could go to this flag, I go to this field, and let me do that. And I didn't actually mean to do that. What I want to do is to go to the lookup, and then I'll see the values of this particular sorry, let's go back for a minute. Let's take the name, go to the lookup, and I'll see that the values options are active, inactive, and this is the field, this is the value I need to copy. So I'm going to copy that value, go back to the business object, I'm going to go back to the status, and I'm going to change the status to a literal value of C1AC active, and I can save that. Now, I would expect then, when I actually show my rendering here, InputMap, I should see it defaulted to active. You'll see it isn't. And this is something which I wanted to point out, that the UI rendering doesn't always show you exactly everything that you see in the schema designer. However, if I actually did try to create a new process flow type, you'll see that it is actually now defaulted to active. So I just wanted to show that it does work, even though the UI rendering doesn't always show everything. So I've now done the first thing of defaulting my status to active. My BO, when I want to show my BO, I would like to be able to add a foreign key. And let me add that, and then we'll go to the foreign key, and I'll show you. There's a few different options here. I'm going to choose this one. Now, adding the foreign key gives me the ability to see three things about the particular field. First of all, if I go to input, now I will see that there is a search for the BO, and the reason for that is because if I go to my foreign key, I will see that a foreign key gives me lots of information, and it does, as I mentioned, three things. First of all, the search navigation. That search icon which came up was related to the fact that we have a search zone here. It also customizes the actual name of the field which has a foreign key with a particular info string, and the info string is governed by this particular program. There's also another thing which is important, and this is the one I wanted to highlight, is the nav option. It allows you to click with a hyperlink on the particular field, and it goes to the object, in this case the business object. So it definitely will allow us to be able to go to the BO of the process flow type directly from the actual record. So that's why I've added in the foreign key over there. And similarly as well for the transaction BO. I'm going to take the same transaction on the transaction BO. I'm going to add in also a foreign key. Now, let me just do that. Let me save. Now, the only thing I want to now do with the transaction BO is to add in a little more control over what transaction BO I fill in. And if I go down, I have the ability to define configure a drop-down. I would like to be able to show only those BO which are of the type process flow, because the transaction BO of a admin process flow type should only be process flow. And in fact, we can check this by using either business service, a service script, or a table, and we're going to be using a service script. We haven't discussed service scripts yet. However, we'll see one in action now to control this drop down. And even if we don't know all the details here, I'm going to show you the basics that we need to know for the moment. So if I go to this particular PowerPoint, I just have a list of the things I wanted to do on in this part of the lesson. So I have actually here the name of the service script. This is the service script that I would like to use. I'll show it to you in action in a minute. We'll just add this in. What this service script does, and it's coming up with an error because I need to fill in the data with the inputs and the outputs. If I go to this particular service script, I'm going to look at the schema. The schema is really the inputs and the outputs governing this script, and for the moment just think of a service script as being some sort of black box which calls the back-end system and can retrieve, in this particular case, all the BOs for a specific MO. So in this particular case, this is an XML schema defining the inputs, and this is the input here. In an XML schema, I need to define what is the input MO, and then I can define the output BO and description. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this information. And before I do that, I'm actually going to open another tab. This will give me the ability to go back and forth between the different screens easier. Now, if I go back to history to my BO, I'm going to fill in now the inputs and outputs for this service script. Again, the service script governs particular business objects based upon the input MO, maintenance object, and in this case, as I said, we're going to be using the configure dropdown service script, going to be putting in the value which I picked up over here before. Okay, and actually I'm going to bring up immediately on the second page here the service script again, because I'm going to be using the schema information a lot, so therefore I want to have that handy. That was the whole reason to bring up the second screen. Okay, so if I have a look at the schema again, this could take a little time. I'm going to take this particular, you see I'm copying everything besides the palm, because that is what the expected input will be on this screen. Second, the input is going to be, the output, sorry, is going to be BO, and the description, which you also need to fill in, is going to be description. And I haven't put the inputs in. I'm going to put that in one moment. Description here is the, again, the schema. Let's bring it up once more. It's this particular, it's the MO, which I need. And again, as I told you, we pick it up from the select without the palm. And here I want to have the MO of the process flow. Okay, and if I go to my over here, I'm going to find my maintenance object of the process flow. And that's the value I want. It's this I want to pick up. And the value here is between single quotes. It's a little tricky. Sometimes literals, we need single quotes. If we saw before, we put in a literal before active C1AC, we didn't have to put in quotes. You just have to pay attention to the actual help, which tells you whether a literal should have a quote or not. So anyway, this concept here of defining a drop-down based upon a service script, you define the name of the service script, and then you put the inputs and the outputs in, and then you save that, and that will confine now the transaction business object to be only those of a specific maintenance object. So we will now be able to see that working when I click over here on my input map. You will see that the related transaction BO now has the drop down of only those transaction BOs of type process flow. At the moment, there's only one defined in the system. We're going to create one called a registration form. So at the moment, there's only one hardship request, which isn't our process flow. That's the demo data example. So that's wrong. We're not going to use that. But you see that it is working. It's picking up the right BO because it's picking up those from the process flow. Okay, so I see that that works, and that's good. That's fine that that's working, and I can now go on to my next point that I want to do here, which is the create date time. Also, I mentioned that I would like to default this to a value. So I'm going to go down again to defaulting and change this to not, instead of using literal, I'm going to use a schema variable. System variable, I mean, and here I'm going to use the current date. So that will fill in with the current date. And the other thing I want to do is I do not want to see the create date time on my input map. My input map doesn't need to have the create date time. I can hide that. And I can do that by going down here to suppression, UI suppression. I'm not going to conditionally hide, but I want to actually suppress it. And I can use this, suppress based upon both input and display. I can allow input but hide it if hide the display if blank. In this case, I can make it much easier and just simply say only visible on the display map, let's say. Okay, so it will not be shown on the input map at all. It will be defaulted automatically. It will be added to the record, but in the background without the user interface playing a role. And in the case of version, I actually don't need version to be shown either on either map, both on the display or the input, because the system deals with it, and that's really a back-end issue not to be shown. Can't use any of these because this one is display map only or input map only, but I can use the suppress, hide both input and display, and that should be sufficient now to work. And if I now go to InputMap, I should see that there's no version and there's no create time, which is good. Okay. I'd like to now add in another field. I'm going to add in an inactive reason. At the moment, we have a status, and the status on the admin is just simply active and inactive. I can make a particular registration form inactive, and it won't be therefore used on a registration form. But let's say if I wanted to add in an inactive reason. So this field, inactive reason, does not actually exist on the MO. If I go to the maintenance object, there's no underlying field inactive reason. So I'm going to have to use the area which is designed specially to extend a particular business object by creating extra fields by using the BO data. Okay, so there is a specific field, and if I go to the maintenance object for a second, I can look at my process flow type, my main table. I will see that there is a field, and this is a true in all of our new entities, called a BO data area. And this is a CLOB, a place where you can add in an XML format extended fields. If I go to that particular field, you'll see it is a very large field value. This is considered a character large object. I call it a CLOB. Some people call it CLOBs. I'm going to refer to CLOB. And in that case, whenever I actually want to add in a field of this type, which does into the BO data area, I'm not going to put it in a underlying, what I'm going to call a real field. I'm going to be putting in this specific field into the CLOB. And the way to do that is to go back to your BO and choose in the schema instead of mapping to a real field, you map to an XML field. And this will describe over here, this is where this is into a large character field, and this is the one we're going to be using for inactive reason. So let's say I add an element below. I'll show you now how that works. I add in a field, we're still using the same element. I'm going to call it inactive reason. In this case, as we just said, we're going to use this map XML. There's only one field that we can map to XML, and it will find that one and automatically populate. Now if I try to save this, it will come up with an error, because as opposed to real fields which you can get the data from the underlying field, when it comes to the XML, you cannot get information about the particular field from the CLOB. In fact, it's actually not coming up with an error. I expected it to actually come up with one. And I expected that to happen. But in order to actually define the particular type of field, you're going to have to fill in under the presentation of the field. So here I'm going to add in the underlying field type which I want to present for the inactive reason. Now there is a field inactive reason, and it's this one here, inactive reason, which I'm going to use, and that will be used to show the particular label correctly. As I said, I need to define that, because without that I do not actually have any information about the label. Now, until I saved it, this is in parentheses because it doesn't actually recognize any details of the label. Now that I have the field, I should be able to save and it should be no problem. As I said, I think in some systems an error actually comes up if you do not define the presentation. In this case, though, I see that we didn't get an error. Anyway, that works okay. The thing I would like to now do, though, is to actually add into the inactive reason a drop-down. And the inactive comes actually from the XFLG, which is actually which indicates that this is an extended lookup. And extended lookups are basically like a standard lookup, except for the fact that it's a BO-based type of lookup. There is a specific place within the system for adding in extended lookups, but you have to define an underlying business object. Without going into all the details, I'm just showing you by example. I added in just before a registration form type inactive reason, and you'll see here that I have two values, inactive and not in use, and I'm going to use this extended lookup to add into my BO. Go back to my BO. And in my inactive reason over here, I'm going to add in, change the data type to an extended lookup. I think I need to put in like that. Sorry. I'm going to pick this one up and I'm going to save that. And now, if I look at my input map, I should have an inactive reason with a drop down as defined as we saw before. Okay, that's very good. But now I would like to go a little bit further and tie the inactive reason to the status. What do I mean by that? I mean that I only want to show the inactive reason if the status is actually inactive. So how would I do that? Well, we did have some ways of suppressing based upon whether it is a display map, not display map, and so on and so forth. But here I want to have it conditionally dependent upon another field. And this is where I use this conditionally hide. And I can actually say conditionally hide based upon a field. In other words, I'm conditionally hiding inactive reason based upon the field status. And I could say hide it if status is equal to C1AC. If it's equal to C1AC, I do not want to show inactive reason. Okay? Now, that in itself is not sufficient because I need to somehow tell the inactive reason that there has been a change in the status value, so it automatically updates the inactive reason correctly. So what I need to do is also inform inactive reason whenever status changes. And to do that, I need to go to status, and I can go down and add independent fields inactive reason. By doing that, I should now be able to see, even in my rendering here, how this will work. Now remember that the status is not automatically defaulted in the rendering correctly, but if I change that to active, do you see the inactive reason disappeared? inactive, it comes up. And that's all to do with I'm controlling that the inactive reason is informed whenever status is changed, and it is conditionally hiding depending upon the value. And it says if the value is active, hide it. Okay, so that's another aspect of hiding that I wanted to show you using this inactive reason. The inactive reason itself is an extended lookup, and we added the inactive reason as a CLOB. Okay, so one more thing I would like to now do, and that is add in a fragment, a piece of code which will be used to show the buttons of duplicate or to delete, and also the record information. And this can be done quite easily by bringing in a UI fragment. Now, let me just show you how that's done. We're going to use a data area with a fragment inside it. And again, I have the list of things from here. Just edit date. It's this data area that I want to actually look for. So let me show you what I mean. At the moment, if I look at my display map, I just have this information over here. I show my creation date over here. I show my business object over here. But that's not the standard pattern that we use in the system. If you go to any one of our particular entities in the system, you'll see the standard is to create a separate section showing that information on the right hand side. And I would like to be able to do that too. And how do I do this? That's the data area which I'm just about to bring in. So I add element below, and this time in element type I'm going to choose include data area schema, and it starts with edit. And as you see, there's a few options here, and I'm going to take the one. This is an admin entity which doesn't have any actions because it doesn't have a life cycle. We'll discuss that later. It's this particular one that I want to take. You'll see how this works. I'm going to save this, and now what this gives me, just by simply adding that data area, which is you can see underneath it, this is a section which has a UI map fragment. It shows edit, delete, and duplicate. No actions because it's an admin object. And over here it has information about the actual record. If I show display map now, I've added in onto the right hand side edit, delete, and duplicate. And that's what I was referring to. And also record information, although not shown here. Again, not everything is shown in the UI rendering. However, if I, again, jump into my process flow type, and I try to add a process flow of the registration form that I just now created, and I create again a test, active is defaulted as we said before. We have a drop down here. Let's say I do that. You will see now that underneath the record information, I have the BO information and the correct date time on the right hand side. In fact, I don't need to show them anymore on the left hand side. I will hide them in a moment. Okay? Let's go back to the BO. Let me show you how the record information picked that up. The BO and the create date. If I go into the UI map fragment, look at its schema, which is UI maps, which I'm not going to look at now, but you will see that there's an HTML. And HTML has code which actually says if the transaction BO or BO exists, then show me the label BO. And in fact, what's happening in our case is that we're picking up the BO and the status date time. And that is why it's shown on the right-hand side. And that is why I can hide it now on the left-hand side. I don't need to show it anymore. So I'm going to go to my BO over here. And I'm just going to change my conditionally hide. I'm going to suppress that I do not show the BO at all, because I don't need to see it because it's shown in the fragment. I don't need this anymore. And now I have updated my maps as I want to. The last thing I would like to do, though, before we stop, for the admin process flow type, for the registration form type, is to add in another field, an element, a person type. Because I'm creating a registration form based upon this registration form type, and I want the business logic rules to be governed from the registration form type, and therefore I would like to put in the type of person I'm going to create, and I want it to be governed by the registration form type. So in order to do that, I'm going to go and add in, and I can go anywhere within this list, and I could create a new section if I want, but I'm going to add directly into the main section another element, and I'm going to add in a field called person type. This is also coming from the CLOB because it does not exist in the actual data itself of the actual fields. Here again, I'm going to need a presentation field to define the label and the rules of what I can input, and it's going to be I'm going to put in person type and see if one like that exists. And I see that I can use this. I can define whether I want the person type to always be required. Let's say I use it to say it's always going to be a required field, because I always want a type of person type. I need a person type on every registration form type. And I can also define here a foreign key. And finally, I also would like to have the person type come from the person type table. So I can configure the drop-down based upon not a service script like we did previously, but now a table, which is a little easier. I can pick up the person type table, find the person type table, and in this case I don't have to put inputs and outputs because the system understands automatically that it can get this information from the table. So I save that. You see now I have the person type shown in my main section. If I show my input map, I will now show person type is shown with a drop down. Okay, let's just finish this up by creating now a registration form type. So if I go to my process flow types, I can create one, and let's call this one business registration form. So biz reg, I believe it needs to be caps, otherwise there'll be some errors. Business registration, business, just call it business. Okay, so the person type is going to be, say, business. Description, this is going to be business. I can say it's active. And at the moment, I don't yet have a related transaction BO. Let me leave it. Oh, let me just fill it in because I just want to show you how it would look if I had one. And then I save it, and I now see that I have a business registration form, and now things are much better formatted in a more standard way that we use. We have a person type with a foreign key, can take me directly to the person type. I have the related transaction BO here. In this case, this foreign key has a context menu as well as a navigation option. I have my fragment on the right hand side defining the edit, delete, and duplicate. And my record information here shows my BO and my creation date, which I removed from my left hand side section to hide it because it's coming from this fragment. In fact, if you look carefully, you will see that for those who actually already know about portals and zones, this particular portal that we see in front of us actually has a zone called actions. We don't need this action zone now because we are now showing the actions edit, delete, duplicate directly inside this particular zone. Okay, the process flow type. However, the process flow type entity was created a little earlier before we actually added our fragments to the page, and that's why we have an extra zone, but it's empty. At the moment, it's not causing us any problems. In the future, when we create our own menus for our registration form type, which we will do, we won't show the action zone. Okay, so that's the end of the second part of this business object, where we define now our process flow type, the registration form type, and have now customized the user interface to show it in a more standard, better format. So we have shown in this lesson that together with the designer and the UI hints, we are able to customize and improve the user interface quite a lot. We can create default values. We can define foreign keys, which give me searches, navigation, anything that foreign key gives you can be seen within the user interface. We can configure drop-downs. Drop-downs can come directly from tables or can be defined off a service script or a business service. We have seen certain dependencies that you can create between different elements. We can hide fields, elements. We can add in data into the business object, into the user interface, which come from fragments if the data is not found directly within the business object. We will see in future lessons that we can add even more functionality using UI hints and the schema lists and other things. As we go along, we will develop that and see more and more. Important though to mention that as much as that we can improve and use and create new interfaces using just a business object and use UI hints which are found within, sometimes certain aspects of the user interface might not be able to be done. It's too challenging and you will need to create your own UI maps. And again, as I mentioned, we are not dealing with UI maps here. The knowledge to create UI maps involves a combination of HTML knowledge and JavaScript, which is a different and a separate skill set which can be dealt with elsewhere, but not within the confines of config tools within this course at the moment.